What would you do if you were arrested at work for a crime you didn't commit and the only witness against you was your own wife? Because Daniel Carter didn't just lose his job that morning, he was handcuffed in front of everyone he worked with, his name dragged through the floor while people he once helped stood there watching like he was a criminal. And the worst part wasn't the police, it wasn't the accusations, it was the moment he lifted his head and saw his wife, Emily, standing beside his boss, Richard Hale, refusing to look him in the eyes. And in that second, something inside him didn't just break, it died. Because just 3 days earlier, Daniel was the most trusted employee in that company in Chicago. The man who stayed late, solved problems no one else could fix. The man Richard trusted so much, he asked him to train a new employee personally. And Daniel, as always, agreed without question, not knowing he was training the man who would replace him and help destroy him. Because slowly, quietly, everything Daniel taught, system access, approvals, internal processes, was being used to create a perfect crime in his name. Transactions he never made, authorizations he never gave, evidence so clean it looked impossible to fight. And when he noticed small inconsistencies and reported them, Richard dismissed it with a calm smile, telling him not to worry, a calmness that should have warned him, but didn't, because Daniel trusted too easily. And while he was trusting his boss, Emily had already been pulled into something far worse, because Richard had approached her privately days before, showing her documents that made it look like Daniel was involved in serious fraud, telling her if the truth came out publicly, Daniel wouldn't just lose his job, he could go to prison. And at first, she defended her husband, insisted it wasn't possible, but doubt is powerful when it's planted carefully. And Richard didn't pressure her. He gave her a role, told her she could help fix things quietly, that staying close to him would allow her to protect Daniel from the worst. And without realizing it, Emily stepped into a trap she thought was saving her husband, but was actually sealing his fate. Because on that Friday morning, when the police arrived with files, evidence, and confidence, calling Daniel's name in front of everyone, placing him in handcuffs as whispers spread across the office, Daniel searched the room for one person, one voice that could stop it. But when he found Emily, she didn't speak, didn't move, didn't defend him, and that silence was louder than everything else. Because in that moment, Daniel realized something worse than being accused. He realized he had been abandoned. And from there, everything collapsed faster than he could understand, because even after he was released pending investigation, his name was already destroyed, his accounts frozen, his reputation gone, no company willing to take a chance on him. And at home, there was nothing left to hold on to, because Emily couldn't face what she had done, couldn't explain her silence, couldn't admit the truth. And instead of fighting for him, she walked away, leaving Daniel alone in a life he no longer recognized. And that was the moment he hit something deeper than pain. Because when the world turns against you, you expect it. But when the person you love does the same, it changes you forever. And for months, Daniel lived in that darkness, surviving day by day, doing small jobs just to eat, carrying humiliation, anger, and confusion all at once, until something inside him refused to stay broken. And instead of asking why it happened, he started asking how, going back through every detail, every inconsistency, every pattern, until slowly, painfully, the truth began to reveal itself. The access logs, the mirrored actions, the new employee who had too much knowledge too quickly. And once Daniel saw it, everything made sense. He hadn't just been accused. He had been replaced, and while he was rebuilding himself from nothing, the company he once worked for began to crack under the weight of its own lies, because systems don't stay perfect forever. And when one inconsistency was noticed by the main CEO during an internal audit, it triggered a deeper investigation, uncovering patterns, connections, and eventually the truth, exposing Richard Hale and the new employee as the architects of the entire scheme. And this time, the fall was real, because unlike Daniel, they couldn't hide behind lies anymore. They were arrested, charged, and sentenced to prison, stripped of everything the same way they had stripped Daniel of his life. And when the news broke, when the truth finally reached Emily, it didn't come as relief. It came as something heavier, guilt, because in that moment, she understood she didn't just doubt her husband, she helped destroy him. And that realization didn't leave her. It followed her, day and night, slowly breaking her from the inside. Because regret doesn't shout, it whispers, constantly, until it becomes unbearable. And with nowhere else to go, she went back to Daniel, standing in front of him again, not as the woman he once loved, but as someone carrying the weight of her choices, hoping he would still see her the same way, hoping forgiveness could fix what she broke. But Daniel didn't react with anger, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her, calmly, like someone who had already buried that part of his life. And when she finally broke down, apologizing, asking for another chance, his answer was quiet, but final. I needed you when I had nothing, and you chose to stand with them. And those words didn't just hurt, they stayed. Because for the first time, Emily understood that forgiveness doesn't always mean a second chance. And from that moment, her life became something she couldn't escape, because the guilt didn't fade. It grew, affecting her health, her mind, her peace, until one day, the weight of everything she carried became too much, and she fell sick, not suddenly, but slowly. The kind of sickness that comes from stress, regret, and emotional pain that never leaves. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the silence, Daniel did something no one expected. He showed up. Not as a husband, not as someone trying to go back, but as a human being who once loved her, helping with her treatment, making sure she wasn't alone in her final days. Because sometimes kindness isn't about what people deserve, it's about who you choose to be. And as Emily lay there, weaker each day, she looked at Daniel not with hope, but with understanding, knowing she had lost something she could never get back. And when she finally passed, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was quiet, just like the way she left his life, leaving behind nothing but a lesson Daniel would carry forever, because sometimes the deepest revenge isn't making people suffer, it's living a life where their choices no longer control you. And as Daniel walked away from everything that once broke him, stronger, calmer, and finally free, one question remained. If the person you loved the most betrayed you when you had nothing, would you still show them kindness, or would you walk away forever? And if this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for more stories that might be closer to reality than you think.